Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm glad to be here on birthday night and get all those chips and everything. It was very jubilant. And Michael told me not to touch this, so I don't know where I'm supposed to stand to make it not be bad. But I'm not touching it. Taking direction. Oh, I can let you touch it, though. Thanks. It's my little enabler. Thanks, Jason. Al-Anon. Happy birthday, everybody, and welcome to the newcomers. If you're really new, you're probably wondering how anybody could possibly even smile being here if you're giving up the only thing that matters to you, which was how I felt when I got here. I tried suicide before AA. That was where AA was in my level of interest, you know. I thought, if I have to give up alcohol, why even live? There is nothing left if I can't drink. That's the only thing that gets me through the day. That's the only thing that allows me to even talk to you or pretend to talk to you or look like a human, is I know that I get to reward myself for having to be with you on this planet. So to come here was just devastating, and I didn't know why people were laughing. I thought maybe they didn't really have the problem that I did. Maybe it wasn't as hard. You know, I remember going to a meeting and hearing someone that the speaker had like 2 years, and it was really hard for me to listen to her because I figured, well, she has 2 years. She's probably fine. She wasn't like me. To have 2 years, but I didn't realize that everybody in this room at one time had 1 day. You know, everybody in this room had 1 day at one point, and I have 20 years, so that's kind of amazing to me. Thanks. But I want to say, I wanted to preface that, because if you're new and you hear that, it may sound like there's nothing that you can relate to, and there may very well not be, but still, that I did come in to my first meeting. It took me 5 years to go to coffee. I was just frightened of everything, and I didn't believe in any kind of higher power, any kind of God, but I did cross my arms sternly and say to some kind of being, okay, I'll go to AA, I'll just never be happy again. You know, and that was the only thing that got me here, was this determination to prove, fine, I'll give up drinking, I'll give up drugs, and I'll just never be happy. Is that it? Is that, you're fine now, you happy? You know, so, but what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. I grew up in the Valley, San Fernando Valley. My dad's a musician. My mom is kind of a political revolutionary and had a lot of Black Panther meetings and a lot of fundraisers for these, for Operation Bootstrap and all these parties and stuff. And it was, you know, the book talks about the allergy of the body coupled with the obsession of the mind. And I don't really even think it matters the environment if I have the biological, you know, predestination to have alcoholism. I mean, there's a part of my body that when it gets alcohol begins to crave it, and the more I have, the more I crave. But the obsession of the mind part, I think, started in my family because, like a lot of us, I had you know, kind of the 50s parents or whatever, where extreme emotions were a little frightening. You could be pleasant among the family, but everything else I learned to do in my room alone. If I was frightened or angry or sad or scared or anything, that just was a little bit too overwhelming for everybody in the house, so I just learned to do that in my room. And so even if I wasn't using quite yet, I still was, that split had started where what I present and what I am among people is different than what I really am. And then you just couple that with the alcohol or drugs to like reward myself or fuel myself. You know, it was like being a little soldier that would go back to my room and rearm and regroup before I went out and did battle. And that was how my living on this planet was. There was no heart-to-heart. There was no exchange of anything authentic. There was no love. It was just me lacquered and hard and cold and guarded. And it was really lonely. When I was growing up, when I was 16, I guess my mom, we had these nuns, part of their whole political revolutionary groove, and these nuns that quit being nuns, and so they gave us the nuns' habits. And so my girlfriend Candy and I, when we were 16, used to dress up like nuns to buy alcohol because they wouldn't card us. And we would drive to we'd get all dressed up in the nuns' habits, and we'd go in my 60 VW, and you know, because do nuns drink? Are they ageless? What are they? You know, it didn't, nobody, what do you do with a nun? So, so we would go in, and I also really like sweet stuff, so I would buy Manischewitz, which is sort of Jewish. So here's this nun buying Manischewitz, and then we would drive around the valley in my VW drinking, and cops wouldn't pull us over because we were still dressed like the nuns. And then we would go to, the only mall back then was Topanga Plaza. So we would go to Topanga Plaza, and we would go up to guys and ask them if they had any reds, you know, still dressed like nuns. And then, you know, just for a good time, I'd ask them if they wanted to get laid. And not only was I a virgin, but dressed like a nun. So I was just trying to stir up trouble. I wasn't going to go through with it. But, you know, I was brought up to believe that God was for stupid, weak people that needed a crutch. You know, that we had this very kind of, you know, very special family life where we were superior to everybody because we believed in nothing. And so I kind of just, you know, had a lot of disdain for anybody of faith or any kind of religion. I thought it was just stupid. You know, and so here we are in the nuns' habits, and if we saw people with kids, we would try to, you know, we were a little drunk, but we'd try to maintain and act vaguely nun-like in case they were raising their children to be stupid and weak and have this belief, you know. So I did have a vague, you know, kind of moral thing about it, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, it just sort of continued, and you know, part of my addiction or whatever is also to always have the right answer to everything. And I think, you know, I didn't know how to, you know, ask for help, and it certainly was apparent when I got to AA. You know, it took me a long time to realize that when you read Chapter 5, How It Works, that was also Chapter 5 in the book. You know, there was a book that actually had chapters in it. I mean, it took me a long time to put all this together because I wasn't going to ask anybody, you know. I just sat and listened, and I thought I'd be embarrassed if I didn't know these things, so I didn't ask. But anyway, I mean, I took acid in high school, and it wasn't for any kind of, you know, cosmic experience, but it was just in case you asked me what it was like, I'd have an answer. You know, I just didn't want to be unguarded at any possible moment. So, so things sort of progressed from there. When I got sober, I realized that in my early drinking, I was a periodic. I didn't know that word until I got sober, but I would go through these periods where I would try to pull it together and not drink, and I'd be really tight and mean and, you know, unhappy, but I was getting on a health kick, you know, and then I would rediscover alcohol, and it was like all the coil that was so tight would just unfurl, you know, and go, oh, what was I thinking? You know, I should have been drinking this whole time. And So I, you know, the period started to get shorter and shorter until the period was every 12 hours. That was, and then it was like Chapter 3. If I didn't drink at work, then I was fine. That's what it got down to right until the last day that I got sober. But in my 20s, I also was, you know, well, as a kid, my first drug of choice was hyperventilation, you know, and we would breathe in and out, in and out, and out, hold your breath, pass out. I'm seeing some heads. Well, this was a fun one. You know, I got good at that where I could sit in general music and just quietly breathe in and out, hold my breath, and, you know, just come back. You know, until at a slumber party, Robin hit her head and was out for a half hour, and everyone was nervous, but then when she came to, we did it some more. So, but I was always, along with, you know, if you have a lot of your extreme emotions squeezed up into your bedroom by yourself, it has to come out somewhere, and I was always obsessed with my weight. I was probably, you know, I was overweight, and I was also obsessed with it, and so I discovered Valium because it had no calories, and I figured if I was, in fact, socially drinking, you could have a glass of wine, I'd have a Valium, we'd be about equal feeling-wise, but I'd saved 80 calories, and then, but then that didn't work very long because I would have a Valium, you had a drink, then I'd figure I've saved the drink, I'll have a drink. So I'd have a drink, I'd have another Valium, then I'd want you to leave. And that's always what happened. As soon as I started in on any of my drinking, I wanted you to leave. And unless I really wanted you to stay, which got messy too. But so then I also, growing up, because of, I was also on amphetamines when I was 13 for my weight. I think it was easier for my parents, if I kept complaining about my weight, to just, we had Dr. Feelgood guy in the Valley, and that's what they did back then, and so I was on these Spanchels and stuff. And then, you combine all this, and I was a little whacked, and the doctor thought maybe antidepressants, I forget what they were, mood elevators probably back then. So I was on mood elevators, and this doctor, he gave pills out really easily. My brother, who then became a heroin addict, was also on mood elevators, not knowing that it was probably the heroin that was the problem, but he was trying to elevate his mood. And then my dad recently got hemorrhoids and went to the doctor, who tried to put him on mood elevators. And I know it's probably, depressing to have hemorrhoids, but I don't think that's really the medical solution. So we came from this history of, you feel something a little bit off, you put something in your mouth. You take a pill, you take a drink or whatever, and you do that for enough time. It's really a physical habit beyond physiological, of just solve it with a pill, solve it with a drink, and never feel anything. So I think in my, in my 20s, I was kind of combining all these things. Mostly drinking vodka every day, the Valium for that diet aid, and then I discovered cocaine, which was good because that helped with the weight. And I was one of those, cocaine users that if I did happen to go to a party, which I was geared up for enough because I had to be geared up for any social interaction, but I would bring the vial that was almost empty. No, I'd have an almost empty vial and a completely full one. And I'd keep the full one for me. I'd break out the almost empty one to share with you, as it looks like I'm friendly. Oh, we're out. How about yours? Then we do yours for a while. Then I'd leave and go do mine by myself. So that was, it took a lot of thought and a lot of planning, but it worked out pretty well. So, I would try to just do the cocaine just as a little diet aid, but those times when you just keep doing it, and then it's 4 a.m, and why aren't paint stores open now? I have to paint my bathroom turquoise now. Damn it, where are the 24-hour paint stores, These things were very important at 4 a.m. So, I found that just all the behavior like that was usually anything that involved a lot of activity. I like the chopping, anything that kept me from you, basically. Anything that involved some kind of pattern where I didn't have to actually be an intimate, open, authentic person in the presence of another. That was completely unfamiliar territory to me, to just be who I was in the presence of another human being. And I would do anything to avoid that. What happened, how I got here, it's weird, those periods when I thought I was a periodic and trying to get healthy, when I did get sober, I was looking back on one of the periods, and you know how when you discover something that you think is the new holy grail that's going to make it all right, and I discovered during my drinking that protein drinks, that's what I needed. I needed protein drinks. And so that meant I have to find the right blender. So I'd go to the stores, and why aren't they open? And this one's the wrong color, and I need and get out of my way. I'd kick people, where's my blender? So then, go write the protein powder, do some research, and, just the whole, anything that involved that kind of brain manipulation that avoided people. But as I looked back on it, I used to get up every morning and make these protein drinks. I'd get the protein powder, like the egg, the banana, vodka, whir that thing up. I don't know what part of me justified vodka in the protein drink, but I know that's what I did, and I did it every morning. When I was at my daily drinking and drug use, I used to, like chapter 3, if the sun hadn't set, I could drink as soon as the sun started to set. And if I wasn't working, then that meant I just walked around the city wearing a baseball cap and reading Time magazine. Walk, walk, walk. I would walk for hours and hours and hours until the sun started to set enough that I could go home and start drinking. And those horrible times when you would wake up in the middle of the night, but it would be sort of twilighty, and you were praying, at least I was praying, that it was the twilight of the sun setting again so I could continue drinking. Because if it was the twilight of the sun rising, I had to wait another, I had to just kill the day. I had to just kill the day until I could drink again. And what happened, I was working in Florida at the time as a script supervisor on a TV show. And I was now daily drinking, and I had a finely tuned alcoholic clock where like on the show, if we had to work until 6, I could be pleasant, I could be fine, I could act like I was one of you, like an alien impersonating people until about 6. And then, alcohol had to be in my body or I would kill you. And so the director said, okay, everybody, we're going to go long today. So instead of 6, we're going to go till 8. And I'm sorry, I was wired for 6 that day, and I didn't know how to get from 6 to 8 without drinking. And so we took a little break, and I went to, it was in Epcot, so I went into Little Germany and pretended to be a tourist and looked for wines and acted like I knew what I was doing, but I just wanted alcohol. And I got 2 bottles of wine to buy them, and she said, do you want them chilled? And I'm like, no, they're a gift. So she put them in little happy bags, and so I walk with my little Disney bags, and I go into the Disney bathroom, and it's twerpy and pretty, and there's little happy music going on, and there's a woman with a baby in my stall, and I want to kick it in the head, get out, I have 2 minutes, and I finally get in there, and I don't have my corkscrew with me, which most people carry at all times. And so now on top of it, I'm mad at myself because I didn't plan right. And I've got this bottle. I have 2 minutes to get back to the truck, and I'd have to get alcohol in me. And I finally decide if I just break it on the toilet while I flush it with the music and the baby's crying, maybe I can get enough of it in me. And then I finally found a big pen. I shoved the cork down there, and I stood there in this happy bathroom drinking this wine with the baby crying, the happy music. And I went, this is not normal behavior. It was just like, that was my moment of clarity, just somehow. And I don't know why, because I had never really told anybody any kind of, frailty about myself. But the next day, the choreographer said something, about herself, like, oh, blah, 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 I'm so blah, blah, blah. And then it just opened up like I could say something back. And I said to her, well, that's funny, because I can't seem to stop drinking. Be careful what you put words to, because, as soon as you say something like that, it's, I don't know, quantum physics, but the solution just is in your face. And, if you go to little sharing meetings, you're dealing with things, just hold on to those defects as long as you can, because as soon as you talk about them. So she just said, well, talk to Romain. I think he used to drink. And so I think that night we had a little gathering that I knew I could take a Valium for to be social before I could go drink my vodka. And Romain was sitting next to me. It was the art director. And so I'm drinking wine because I could do that socially, and I'm chatting with people and drinking and laughing and looking at our little circle of people and, hi, how are you? This is great. It's a good show. And I turned to him, I go, I can't stop. But anyway, how are you? And he didn't leap up and say, we've got one, there's an alcoholic at the table. He just waited till everyone kind of died down and moved around, and we were done with our meeting. And he just said, I heard what you said, and I'm an alcoholic, and I've been sober about 1.5 years in AA, and when we get to LA, I'll give you a call, we can go to a meeting. And so we get home, and it's August. He calls me, and he says, it's Romain. Just wondered if you wanted to go to a meeting. And I said, oh, thank God you called, but false alarm. Whew. I think it was the Florida, it was the humidity, but I've got it under control now. And so he just, he didn't say, oh no, I've seen you do. He just said, okay, great, well, I'll see you on the next show. And that was August. I got sober in December. So that started that process of that hideous, the cat's out of the bag drinking, where you can't drink alcoholically because now you've already called it something, and I wasn't going to go to AA because that would mean probably I got the idea that you don't drink here, and that was hideous. So that was, so that started that process. And I remember thinking maybe it was just all the pills, I'll just drink. And I got, but at one point, that's when I called suicide prevention, and I said, if I take 200 milligrams of Valium and a bunch of sleeping pills and a lot of vodka, do you think that'll do it? And she said, well, now, what's your name? And I said, no, this is an information call. I don't need saving. I just need to know, is 200 and she, where are you calling from? I said, no. So I hung up. So I call UCLA and get some young doctor on the phone, and I said, now, if I take 200 milligrams of Valium, some sleeping pills, and a lot of vodka, do you think that'll do it? He said, that should do it. Click. So I just, wrote one of those sloppy notes we write, like, oh, I'm so sorry. And, and I took all that stuff, and, apparently I woke up, but, tired. But, just mostly annoyed that I had to have another day on this planet, because now nothing was working, you know. The end was near, and I couldn't kill myself, and I couldn't go to AA, and I just limped along trying to control it in this hideous, like, dark, lonely place. And Christmas I tried not to drink because I didn't want to be in a blackout, and my parents drink, or my mom does, so that was hard because I was really envious of her being able to drink, and so I started drinking. Anyway, the next day I left work early to drink, and that was the first time I'd ever left work to drink. And I came home and it was 3 o'clock, so I made a rule. I said, I poured myself a glass of brandy, that someone had given me some brandy. If I drink this now, I'm an alcoholic. If I wait until 4, I'm not. I just 1 hour, just watched the clock, me and the brandy. And it finally, at 4, I started drinking. And I called Romaine, I think it was that night. I don't remember the conversation except for that I think he said, can you stay sober tomorrow? I'll pick you up and we'll go to a meeting. You don't have to think any further than that. And I guess I said yes. And he picked me up. You know, what somebody once said, that it's not our prayers that get us here or keep us here, but it's the prayers of everybody in the room before we get there, that it's like a bank account that almost, I don't know what happens, but something miraculous happens. The fact that I stayed sober that day until he picked me up, based on what, I don't know, nothing in my own mind, nothing, no willpower. It just, if you're sober 24 hours, you are such a miracle. I don't know how that happens, but he picked me up and took me to the meeting, and it was a book study, which I've been to since, but he said, now here's some stuff about God, don't worry about it, we'll just go to the meeting and see how you like it, and that's it. He was very he knew I was frightened of all this. And what scared me more, though, is as we got closer, he reached behind him and got his big book, the hardcore big book, and and as we got closer, other people were carrying books, and they were like very Stepford, and we have books, we have hats, we have handshakes, hello, and I'm just like, whoa, because, deep down I really wanted to belong to anything, but because that's so shameful to me to have any kind of need, any kind of desire for human contact or comfort, I just have to mock it. So I went and I basically heard people seemingly share authentic things out of their mouth in front of other people. I had never done this. It was stunning to me. And I ran into one person I'd worked with, and he said, oh, this is great, you're in AA. Oh, there are all kinds of meetings here. And Romaine gave me his directory, and which I still have, but I thought at the time he gave me the directory, and there must have been something about this that I thought was special, because, ooh, I have the secret. I didn't know you could just get them in the back, but I have the directory, And so then this guy, Stephen, he bought me a big book, and he said, oh, this is great, you're going to love it. There are all kinds of meetings. There's step studies, there's big book studies, there's participation, there's speaker meetings, women's stag, men's stag. And he goes, and then for people that are really screwed up, there's architects of adversity meetings. And I don't know if any of you know architects meetings, but I thought that was his code for saying, you're really screwed up, you need to be in architects meetings. I didn't know he was just sort of saying it. So I thought, oh. So I looked in the book for architects meetings, and that's where I went, and for about the first year. And those meetings just saved my life, because they started on time, they ended on time, and in between, whatever went. I mean, they read the chapter 5 and the traditions, but people could share for as long as they wanted. People were throwing things, coffee was being spilled, it was chaos, people were at fights, there were knives, it was just, and then the Lord's Prayer, and then we'd be done. So it was pretty funny. And architects, everyone was so self-obsessed, and it was perfect for me, because I couldn't even talk for the first 6 months. I needed to hear everybody's venom come out of their mouth for me. I needed all the insanity to be verbalized for me till I could even speak, and people would just had to share. Me, please, me, and then the guy would get called on. It's like, man, I realized I think I killed somebody when I was drinking, and I haven't really talked to my sponsor yet, but I think I should probably talk to him, maybe do a little writing. The next one, me, it's like, I bought this leotard and it's too small, and I don't know if I should return it. I mean, nobody was listening. It didn't matter what you talked about. Everyone blah-blahed on for the whole meeting, and it was great, and that's where I got sober, and I got a commitment there, and I started to share in that meeting just stuff that was going on. And also if you're new, here are some little tricks. If it's an hour-and-a-half meeting, they have those hideous coffee breaks. Where everybody but you stands up and looks comfortable and at ease and knows what to say to everyone else, and they've probably been comfortable on the planet their entire lives except you. Well, during those coffee breaks, I hated them. So what I did whenever I went to a new meeting was I would try to find where the literature was. And that was my island during the break. I would get up and I have a reason. The break, I go to literature table, and that way no one would talk to me. And I'd turn my back, and it worked. Nobody talked to me, and I read some literature. But mostly I just avoided all that spontaneous conversation you all seem to do so well. And the other thing I did was to volunteer to help clean up the meeting. Because, and if you're new, I suggest this, and it's not because we like cheap new labor, but that I was so starved for human contact when I got here and so inept at how to even go about it that cleaning up a meeting bought me like 20 more minutes of hearing human voices around me. And that's what it was like. It was like for 20 more minutes I could hear people making plans, getting their car keys, going to coffee. Back then it was like cleaning the ashtrays and stuff. And the loneliness, I would buy 20 more minutes. And then that's how it worked. I would meet one other person that was cleaning up a meeting, and then the next week I would see them again too. And that was how I would get my first friend, my first familiar face. And it took a while, because it's like I was a non-person when I got here. I was stripped of the only thing that fueled me, the alcohol, and had to start from like ground zero and building who I was as a person. And it all came from coming to the meetings. I mean, the steps are phenomenal, and the order of the steps is phenomenal to me. And I do believe God-given. And but it was coming to meetings that socialized me, that had me work amends when I thought I had hurt someone or something, and heard other people's process, and it just really helped the loneliness. I heard about sponsorship, and I wasn't really going to ask, so I just sort of kept listening and hearing, about getting a sponsor, and then it just seemed like it was going to be a lot of work because I was going to have to go to every meeting, take resumes, do a cross-section, go downtown, fill out forms. I mean, I didn't know how it worked. I was sure it was very extreme and had to be perfect. And there was this girl sitting next to me from New York, so I used to drive her to meetings because she didn't have a car, and she had like 3 years. To me, that was, phenomenal. And I loved her. She just talked about the program so beautifully, and she said, until you get a sponsor, you might want to practice the tool of calling someone on a daily basis. If you want to call me, you can, and just get the tool of picking up the phone on a daily basis. You don't have to say anything important, just checking in, hang up. So I did that with her for about a week, and then I kind of kept hearing about sponsors, and I said, so what's this sponsor thing? And she said, well, it's usually someone whose sobriety you respect, and you're comfortable calling them on a daily basis in the beginning, and they can help you through the steps. And I said, well, is it, kind of like what we're doing? And she said, well, yes, it's kind of like that. And I said, well, what would happen if I asked you to be my sponsor? And she said, well, I'd either say yes or no. And I said, well, will you be my sponsor? And she said, I'd love to. And she was my sponsor for the first 2.5 years. And, and she was the one that when I thought I had to clean it up for everybody, she let me just be, fucked up, very, just completely lost with everything. And I got in the habit of calling every day, and I went through my inventory with her. And at 9 months, well, it wasn't. I think I did my inventory about 9 months. But I went to the dentist at 9 months sober, and I was so proud at 9 months because that seemed like such a big deal, and I felt sort of comfortable. Maybe I'd done my inventory, so I really felt like I belonged here. It took that for me to feel kind of like a part of this. And so I go into the dentist, and I tell the assistant, I'm in AA about 9 months now, and so I can't really have any codeine, and I just wanted you to know that I'm sober. And she's like, okay, well, go in there. And so so I tell the dentist, I'm sober now, 9 months, and I can't really have any drugs or alcohol. And he's going, great, gas? Sure. that stuff up. I mean, I didn't know that was a problem. No one mentioned gas, he did the work, and afterwards he said, I did quite a bit of work, not quite a root canal, but it was pretty extreme, and are you sure you don't want a prescription for codeine? I said no, and but I'll tell you, this is where my sponsor was always so anal about mouthwash and flambés and things baked with alcohol, and I didn't know why. I wasn't going to drink, and she said, why trigger the disease? You may not drink, but why live in the hell of trying to decide on a daily basis, no, 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 and why have the obsession rekindled if you don't have to? And so I got a dose of that at 9 months because I told him first, no prescription. Well, this stuff started to wear off, even though it wasn't that much, and I'm thinking, maybe just in case. And so then I get the prescription, and my second clue was that I didn't fill it at the pharmacy downstairs. I drove 5 miles out of the way where they didn't know me to fill it. And then I drove home with 15 Tylenol codeines just pulsing in my car, pulsing, the Holy Grail, they become gold, And I got home and I lined them up, 15 of them on the table. I'm anticipating pain at any moment. And just waiting for the pain. And so I called my sponsor and she wasn't home. So I called her sister who was sober and she said, flush them down the toilet. So I called someone else and they said, flush them all but one, and then if you do really have some pain, you can take that, you won't put yourself in a position of slipping, and you can get back to the dentist and have the real problem solved, And then finally I reached somebody who said, I was sharing at a newcomers meeting that there's no condition under which I would drink. And this little newcomer came up and said, well, what if you were on the North Pole and you hadn't eaten for 3 weeks and the dog comes up with the brandy? Wouldn't you drink then? And he said, if I say yes to that, you'll find me on the North Pole tomorrow. And he hung up on me. And I'm like, oh, great, a parable, and But I realized that, that's why the first step is the first step. I'm powerless over this. If my sobriety is conditional, then that condition will manifest to demand that I drink. If I'm powerless over alcohol, if I admit that, then that's it. I love that that's the first step. It's not, my life is incredible, but I don't stay sober because my life is incredible. My life is incredible, because I have stayed sober, and I stay sober no matter what. And I just love that no matter what. I used to hear them say that, those things in meetings, and I just thought, oh, this is so hokey. But, it's great to have that in your brain. And when I was pretty new, there were times, and I share this with sponsees now, where just make it to bed sober. And sometimes that means I go to bed at 6:30, just so I don't cause any more wreckage. And you know what I mean. Sometimes that's the best I can do. And my head wants to compensate and make up for lost time, or also do me in and say, no, I should be, accomplishing so much more than just going to bed sober. But there are those times as alcoholics that if that's the best I can do, the next day always feels better. Sleep does something amazing, and not causing wreckage does something amazing. Causing wreckage is fine, because then you get to do a 10th step. As long as you don't drink, it's all fine. My sponsor also said, just take it slow. She was from New York, like a step a year or something, but, a little too slow. But she also said, we all have attendant addictions. We all want to fill this, and don't come here and she was telling this to me, and, and quit smoking and quit, like sex and food and shop. We all have things that we need to do for a little while once we get sober. And she said they will be lifted. They'll be displaced. They will be displaced as real love comes in. And that real love comes from going to the meetings and developing a relationship with a higher power. And, she suggested I start praying every night. And my prayers were so short at night. All it was, dear God, thank you for waiting. I felt like I had been carried retroactively till I got sober with my blind, harsh criticism of anyone with faith. And it was sort of, it melted me. And I mentioned these sort of attendant addictions because at 5 years sober, I was bulimic. I was still in meetings, sharing as honestly as I could, but I still had a reward that I treated myself to. And whatever your little reward is, we have them. And I was taking a cake at the meeting that I had first gone to, that book study, and I was also leading the meeting to share. And I felt like such a sham that I was going to truly say how much I loved AA and how it had opened my heart and how it was an incredible, rich life of being a person among persons. And yet I shared, and yet this is what I'm going to do when I leave here tonight. And I don't want to live that way. And it certainly wasn't what I wanted to share. You know, I wanted to look a little better than that. And sure enough, like in 2 weeks, I was in a program. And that was just another layer. And thank goodness nobody said you have to be perfect the day you walk in here. You know, some things take a long time. And I think also it's like we all have the same things in the deck of cards that we're given, but they're just shuffled differently. So, you know, you may have no trouble at all in the work area, but have, you know, relationship stuff or, you know, just whatever it is. I think they all get lifted and we all help each other. And I just love that she had no judgment in that way. And at 10 years sober, I was driving with a boyfriend who was not an alcoholic. And I share this because I rarely had obsession to drink. I did want to kill myself a lot when I was new because it was so painful territory, and it's hard for me to remember why that was. I remember thinking, she had me write down, I wrote down why, and I felt like I would never love anyone, I would never matter to anyone, I would never contribute in any way to the planet. I mean, this was my laundry list of why I should die. And I remember coming across that and realizing that those things were no longer true. You know, somehow coming here, you know, it's like our head says it has to be something huge when it could just be giving your, you know, number to a newcomer or talking to somebody. I mean, I don't think God decides, you know, point level for amount of amazing things that you do. If it's love, it's love. It doesn't matter the size of it. But anyway, at 10 years sober, I was driving around with this guy in Colorado, and he was a normie, and he also didn't talk. He was one of those guys that don't talk. And we were in a car without a radio, and we'd been driving 12 hours, and I was insane. I was just insane. I kept trying to start a conversation. I was so starved for conversation, for contact, for anything. And we were up in Colorado, and I had a little cough, so we stopped at an AM/PM, and I decided I needed some cough syrup. And somehow I decided I needed the kind with codeine or with something a little extra oomph, you know. I mean, maybe it's the altitude or something. And so there I'm on the knees at the AM/PM reading labels, somehow trying to justify cough syrup. And it was like at 10 years, I just ran to the payphone. I walked to the payphone, and I called central office in Denver or something, and they said, can you get to a meeting tomorrow? And they told me where it was, and I got in the car, and I told Jim, you know, he didn't say much. And but we did get to a meeting the next day, and you know, and it was like being a tight, dry sponge. The second I walked into a meeting of absolute strangers, except for absolute family, it was AA. It was just heaven to me. I just felt my sponge just go, you know, and I just filled up with all of you, and I was able to go through the rest of the trip and break up with him. So. But the thing is, it was the loneliness that got triggered. It was that being with a person, but there's no contact. It kind of felt like growing up to me. It felt like I should be alone and doing damage to myself just to compensate for how I'm feeling, you know, and I did alternate action. I called AA. You know, I also as a kid, I think one thing that always kind of fueled me was fame. You know, I think if you don't get what you think is the right kind of love or something, you can just fantasize about some really grand love that you'll get in the future. And, you know, and I had fame kind of pull me along for a long time, and that was one of my defects that didn't get lifted for quite a while. I mean, I still thought I was going to, it didn't really matter what it was, as long as it brought fame of some sort. You know, as a kid, I was going to win an Oscar, and then I was going to be a writer, and then, you know, I don't know what, but it was going to be some kind of esoteric, you know, famous kind of, you're all fine for now, but wait till I get those other really good friends, you know, and it was just not being in the reality. You know, I hated the 12 and 12 with that person among persons thing, because I thought I had to be just grander than that. And And finally realizing that fame was a little defect or a little drug that I had created, helped me for a while when I was little maybe, but was now keeping me from, truer love with just people on the planet. And, that was slowly lifted. And also, I think just getting older, you can't really continue to fantasize in the future when it's not that big anymore. But, it's like I'm probably not going to be a teen model. And, or an astronaut. These things are probably just not open to me anymore, or never were. And so where am I now? I don't know. I'm probably more content. Well, I'll share with this because my friend Tracy came with me, and I just love that she's here. That I think I want to. What I learned in coming to meetings was just miraculous. The concept of showing up, of being of service. These things that just seem kind of hokey and aren't really going to matter in the big scheme of this dramatic life you're planning for yourself. But I really want to stress, because I was such an isolator, that going to, I remember being sober about 30-something days and telling my sponsor, I'm not going to go to a meeting today. And she said, why not? And I said, well, I'm a little depressed. She says, well, that's when you go. And it stunned me. I thought you would have me leave if I showed up not perky, I thought if I wasn't pleasant, you'd ask me to leave. And it was here that I got to find out that I could be everything. One, mostly you're all involved in your own things, so you didn't notice. But to me, it was a big deal that I still showed up no matter how I felt. And I just want to stress the amazing, how I'm looking at getting older is that there are only so many rides on the park to go on, and the park is going to close, and it's up to me which ones I want to go on and how much life I want to live before I die. And the thing is, I have these parties every few months of hearts, playing hearts, and a bunch of my friends come over, and we have little corny laminated name tags and teams, and there's a fabulous grand prize and all this stuff. And there are times that I'm playing with these. And I have to say, when I was new, I heard about someone with 5 years having Trivial Pursuit parties. And she had 5 years, she was fabulous. I thought, God, she has people to her apartment? I was stunned by this. No one ever came into my apartment. That was my refuge. And so I remember turning to my friend, and at about 1 year sober, we decided to have these Trivial Pursuit parties. And we'd invite 4 or 5 people over. They'd bring Chinese food. We all had about a year or two, and we'd play Trivial Pursuit, and we'd eat, and then they'd leave. And it was like great practice at actually having people and a purpose, and we were sober. And so here now, at 20 years sober, I have all these people come over, like 20 people, play cards, and they are all just wonderful people, and they probably don't know the miracle this is, but I'll look around the room at each person and think, where I met them, how they came into my life, why I love them. And I met some at work, I met some at AA, I met some swing dancing, some salsa dancing. And the thing is, it occurred to me, and this is, I just want to end with this, every single person that I know and love and adore, I met outside of my apartment, If you're not working, do volunteer work. When I wasn't working, I would do volunteer work because I needed to get outside of my apartment. That's where the people are. That's where I meet people. That's where I love people, And so I guess that's it. I hope you all stay sober, keep coming back. Thank you.